Hi, everybody. Welcome to 2025. Happy New Year if you celebrate Tet, Chakman Namoy, Kang Hei Fat Choi for all those others. And sorry if you didn't get a chance to get out to Quartz Fest, but lucky you. You get to see my presentation that I just did at Quartz Fest because this is the latest installment. I have a lot of up-to-date information. So it's very relevant to the discussion of what's going on with amateur television. A lot of what I want to present is listed on the agenda here. We may touch on a few other things, but I want to be able to emphasize on a couple of salient points, and that's scattered throughout this presentation. Most notably is the fact that the IC 905 came out. I don't know that anybody's not aware of that, but it is the first commercially available. Um, Not to say that there haven't been other products from other people, but this one specifically is um, a multi-band radio that extends all the way up into super high frequency, 5 gig and 10 gig if you get the module, and soon to come out 24 gig, which is awesome. But so this is the first radio that you could push a button and then all of a sudden you can support amateur television. It's an FM mode, still analog, but still, thank you, ICOM. You're like the first. There are some people that are crying in their beer that it doesn't support USB cameras, inputs, and a bunch of other stuff like digital modes and stuff. It's like, guys, settle down. This is the first radio. It's the first one. And so basically, I believe what we're up against is if you know anything about the radio, there's a control head, and then it uses Ethernet, and then some protocols that go up that wire along with PoE to drive essentially the RF electronics in the remote head. So it's kind of like two pieces connected with the wire in between. So you hook the radio up to 12 volts, and then it does everything else. And then you hook antennas up to the RF unit, and off you go. Well, down in that head unit, the control unit, I should say, um, it's a pretty big FPGA that's designed to be able to turn all the radio interfaces into the signals it takes to get up to the unit. So it's actually synthesizing what's called I and Q symbols in digital form and sending that up the wire, and then it's transformed back into whatever the modulation is that's going up the wire. It's already been synthesized from the FPGA. And so that FPGA is pretty busy. It's doing a lot of stuff. Not a lot of room for doing digital modes. And so, there's people that are complaining, hey, I paid so much for the radio. I'm saying, stop complaining. Be happy it does FM. So that's a start. But so we want to be able to talk about why analog versus digital. And that's because everybody's been doing analog forever and still do analog today. But then we also know about digital. And so there's this analog versus digital argument. Analog is old school. Why preserve it? Well, why abandon it? It's well known. It's a working solution. We all have the basic knowledge and the bits and pieces, parts and stuff that you can throw together to do an analog solution. But then, of course, it's been said digital is better than analog, so why bother? Okay, so in life, there's always trade-offs. And then ICOM released the 905, and so it supports analog because of the limitations that they have in the design to be able to support anything else. But so to me, this whole argument is kind of moot. The real question is, what is the goal? What are you trying to do? And here's your hint: it's to enable and grow. And this is what's important to a lot of the clubs. It's, what is the next step here? What is a good thing to get into? Well, if you didn't notice, it's the thing that everybody has in your hand. It has a camera, it has a screen, and your kids love these things and they're glued to it doing TikTok and Instagram. Well, so what we want to do is differentiate away from what streaming does, because streaming is still a valuable thing. We're doing it now. That's what a Zoom call is. We're streaming. But so to get back to the analog versus digital, we do want to bring up some interesting points, which is analog, as you know, when you modulate the carrier, it's always standard definition because it was never defined to do anything other than 480 lines. Uh, it's a fixed 6 megahertz bandwidth for AM NTSC TV. FM, you have the opportunity to be able to do more bandwidth. It just depends on what kind of fidelity you want to run. In which case, the ICOM has 3 different bandwidth settings. We'll talk a little about that later. Um, as we know, analog is easily distorted by reflections, but it doesn't mean you can't necessarily watch it. It'll be distorted and things like that. And then it has very minimal processing requirements, actually pretty simple to do. So it's got a low learning curve, very low cost to start up because we all have these little doodad cameras in our junk boxes and things like that. It requires less power to transmit. Analog video only goes to full power when you go full black. But so we're not transmitting black all the time. We're usually putting our mug shots and things or whatever. We're always putting pictures on our carrier, so it's not that bad. Now, digital, on the other hand, supports a wide range of resolutions, standard definition, high definition, ultra high definition, and so forth. And the bandwidth that we use is actually adjustable. And it's a relationship with the symbol rate that we use to modulate the carrier. And of course, it has this very well known cliff effect, and it's related to how the symbols are error corrected, and or not, as the case may be, but that once the error correction can't fix the errors, you lose lock. And as long as you can keep on correcting the errors, you stay in lock. And and so the rest is history. And that's why you have that cliff effect. And of course, because it's digital, it adds a bunch of processing delay because it takes time to manifest those frames in the compressed domain. Um, uh, to be able to do compression, you have to be able to look at the things in the frame that are changing and only compress those parts. And so it does that by comparing a series of frames in a sequence and looking at what parts are changing. So that's the delay. Of course, there's a steep learning curve because this is all new stuff. And so there's lots of terms, lots of jargon. And so there's a bunch of hype also. And you want to know what the difference between the different kinds of codecs and things are. So of course, with all that comes with a higher cost to startup because now you have bits and pieces of technology which are needed to be able to do all that processing. So it's a little bit more than just a camera and a modulator. You need an encoder and things like that. And so the best part about digital, as we mentioned before, about the cliff effect, when the signal is locked and there's no errors, the pictures are always perfect. And so that's one of the benefits of digital, which is different from analog. Analog degrades gracefully, but then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then with digital, it's perfect, 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 and then it's not, that kind of thing. But so it's always a good picture. And of course, the fidelity is improved by how much of a bit rate you choose. A bigger bit rate, higher, fast, more bits means more data, which means you can have more accuracy. Um, the output of a digital carrier is a lot like RTTY. It's always on. You're always producing what's been termed as a Bart's head. And if you remember, Bart Simpson had that haircut that was flat across the top with a bunch of little wavy lines in it. Well, so a digital carrier, for lack of a better term, is a Bart's head and it's always on. And so the amplifier has to operate in a very efficient range. The main thing you're trying to avoid is compression in the amplifier at any point whatsoever, because that will distort the modulation. And when the symbols are distorted, it's a problem for the receiver to remove errors and stuff that's built into the coding. And so you don't want that. You want a very, very class A amplifier for running digital carriers. But the really super important point here is inside that digital carrier, you can carry multiple streams or multiple programs, or however you want to put it, multiple channels, I guess you could say as well. And this is, everybody's familiar with, when you turn on the TV and you're looking at the new digital spectrum. When you scan, it comes back, and then you see the channels, and it'll say 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. Well, what they're doing is they're multiplexing multiple channels on one carrier. And you can't do that with analog, and that's the one of the major salient points that we wanted to make on this presentation. So more on that later. So why do we want digital video? Well, we want that because of all those resolutions we talked about. And of course, it uses compression technology to be able to take the video picture and turn it into a bit stream that can pass through the transmitter. And so compression works by only transmitting just the bits of the frames which are different from the previous frames. We mentioned this all before, but so just to hammer it home, digital video allows channel multiplexing to support two or more channels in a single carrier. Well, we couldn't do that back in the analog days unless you got another frequency. And so on the same frequency that we have today, we're able to either run either at a slower symbol rate to fit in smaller than 6 megahertz. Okay, like the guys down in LA, Santiago Peak, all the ATN guys over in California, in Southern California, use a 2 megahertz DVB-T system because there was no room left in the spectrum that was allocated by Scrubba. So the coordinating council did an MOU with those guys, and so basically they hammered out in their document how they coordinated was they switched to DVB-T. So the analog guys had to go out and go buy a box that did this thing, and it made it work. So that's the only way they can make it work, because Cactus and many other Link people down there have already run away with all the spectrum. So there was very little spectrum left that they weren't going to interfere with. So the few people that were in the part of the band where the 2 megahertz is allowed in Southern California, they had to move to a different spot. But now it's now everything's working, so they're not stepping on each other. Okay, so now we're going to kind of switch gears. We're going to get back to that multiplexing point and talk about some stuff that we can do with IP packets, and there's a reason why. So video and analog, and video and audio streams, I should say, are compressed bit streams. But what we ship are packets. And so the bit streams that are created by an encoder are turned into what's called an MPEG-2 transport stream. And those packets are a fixed length. And so the bit streams that come from the video encoder are packetized elementary stream. When I say elementary stream, we're talking about the video essence, meaning when the camera turns on, you encode the video into a bit stream, and then those bits are packetized to fit inside of a transport stream packet. So because the way the video encoder works, it's got a distinction between video frames by making I frames, B frames, and P frames. So the I frame is a complete picture, and it's kind of like an anchor frame. The very next sequence of frames are B frames, and B frames are bidirectionally predicted. They're predicted both backward and forward in time. And then the P frames are only predicted in the forward direction. And so depending on how you make your group of pictures, the encoder will encode video frames either as I's, B's, or P's. And in a sequence of video, it'll make lots and lots of B pictures because those are the most efficient frames. They look in both directions. And those are the ones that are the most bang for your buck. The I frames are quote unquote expensive frames. And so those are the ones that have all the detail, but you only make those once or twice a second. And then you fill the rest of the video with the B's and the P frames. So what happens is the B frames are kind of small, but they're important. And then the P frames are a little bit larger, and then the I frames are huge. Their data size, their data set is pretty big. So what that ends up doing is they're all different lengths of bit stream length definition, I guess you could say. And so when we packetize them, we have to make certain that the packets can carry iframes, which are then chunked up across transport stream packets. So an iframe has to be broken into, it has to be fragmented. But B frames, you can actually stick one, two, and sometimes three B frames in a single TS packet. Not always, but you know what I'm saying. They're small enough that they can actually make them fit. P frames are typically the size of a transport stream packet, give or take. So the relatively small B frames are smacked together really close to each other in the transport stream, and then the I frames are spread out. All this is to say there's a whole bunch of things that are going on in the background, and you don't realize how much complexity there is to creating an encoded stream. But at the end of the day, the transport stream is what we're managing through the modulation scheme. So at the end of the day, the output that comes from the encoder are these uniform 188 byte packets that are filled with all the different pieces of information for video and audio. And there's this other stuff called data for metadata for announcing certain aspects of the stream. Metadata is data about data. And so we have to send those out every so often to be able to announce all this stuff that's happening inside the encoded stream. So here's video and audio and data, and all those are being pooped out in 188 byte packets. And so any of those streams that are smaller than 188, they just add some stuffing just to make it a complete 188. Okay, so now you have this vision of this multiplex of 188 byte packets. Well, each one of those is labeled with a PID or a packet ID. And so inside the MPEG TS standard, they define up to 8,192 unique PIDs, which is in hexadecimal from 0 to 1 FFF. So it's a they use hexadecimal, which is base 16, to be able to define PIDs. And then furthermore, we use bit rate to define the transport rate. So I know this sounds like a kind of, well, Joel, we just started making 188 byte packets. Yeah, but so we talk about the bit rate because that's the rate at which the encoder is running at. And then how it chunks up the data to be able to make 188 byte packets, we don't care. It's still, when you turn the encoder on, you tell it to run at 4 megabits per second. Well, but that's making some number of 188 byte packets per second. That doesn't matter. It's still however fast you set the encoder. So for example, you'll see a lot of talk about 4.5 megabits per second. But we'll probably show that in an example here in a second. But so anyway, the payload capacity of a digital carrier, or the symbol rate that we use, has a direct relationship with how fast it can carry those packets, or the bit rate. And so the carrier limits the data throughput of whatever you can encode. So in other words, when you turn the modulator on to carry the bits, you have to turn it on at a particular symbol rate to carry the payload. If you don't have enough symbols, you'll oversubscribe the buffer and then you'll drop data on the floor and that will create errors. So if the symbol rate is too low, you have to increase it. But when you increase the symbol rate, that'll increase the size of the carrier bandwidth. There is a one-to-one relationship with that. Oops. Okay. So we're going to envision what a multiplex MPEG TS packet system looks like. So there's these PAT and PMT packets. They're defined where PAT is always on PID 0. That's born into the MPEG-2 specification. The PMT can be on any PID value. So in this case, I just picked 1020 because you can. It doesn't matter. That the PMT announces where all the programs are at. So in this case, I'm going to be announcing 6 programs inside the PMT. So inside the PMT table, in which case, let's back up a second. I want to make certain people understand. Program association table talks about the PMT and how many programs there are, but inside the PMT, it lists all the programs and the PID values of the videos and audios. So all this information about where all the video and audio packets are for making program 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are listed in this packet right here. But that the PAT table says you have 6 programs and they're all pointed to in this PMT table. And so here I've made a feeble attempt at trying to show you what it looks like when a transport stream is flying along. You have all these packets for, here's a video PID for program 3, and here's a video PID for program 1. Here's the PAT table. Notice it's PID 0. And so forth. So you have videos, here's an audio, video, lots of video PIDs, here's an audio, here's video. So it's just flying out the door with all this video traffic. And so here's a 3, there's a 3, there's a 3, there's a 3. And so program 3 is chunking out of at a very specific rate. And if you could see this in real time, these packets would be flying through the multiplex. This is representing close to like 20 megabits per second. You wouldn't see these packets flying. The data is moving so fast. But if you take a snapshot picture and freeze it in time, this is what it would look like. And so down at the bottom, I'm showing you um, what it would take to carry 7 MPEG packets in one IP packet. So one IP packet could carry 7 PIDs, then the next IP packet could carry the next 7 PIDs, and so forth. And so IP has bigger buckets for payload. And so you can carry lots and lots of data, in this case, 7 MPEG packets. And so that's why I wanted to touch on this, because in the IP domain, and we do use it to carry video, you can define what's called a single program transport stream, which means it's one program of content. Like in the old days, when you turned on channel 4, you saw one channel. Well, so an SPTS is just a definition that we use, but that way you can break it down to the single most easy set of elements. One PAT, one PMT, one video PID, one audio PID, and you're done. And there's a PCR in there as well, but we won't get into that. And then the next form is what's called a multi-program transport stream, where you can have IP streams that are carrying multiple packets like we just saw in the previous example. I'm carrying multiple programs at the same time. And so that's the multiplex aspect. But in this case, I brought it up because it's just a term you're going to hear. SPTS, MPTS, it's either one or it's many. And so transport streams are how we carry the data to and from encoders to decoders. That's why there's this spec. So any MPEG TS packet can be carried over IP either as a unicast or multicast. Um, Unicast is how you send packets over TCP/IP from one point to another. It's going from point A to point B, and that's it. Multicast is where you send out a UDP packet, not TCP. Okay. And so then multicast is spraying the network so that anybody that can see a Class D address can subscribe to that IGMP and watch that multicast. The problem with multicast is it will not span routers. It was, multicast was never defined to go through the internet through routers because it would create flooding. And as I mentioned before, so when you're sending out all this data, which can, what we're talking about is from 1 to 7 MPEG TS packets can be carried in a single IP packet. And if you're sending out IP packets at, 5 megabits per second or whatever, that's a lot of data. And if you're sending it through the internet, you can send it from point A to point B, but you can't multicast. And so that gets into networking, 201 type stuff. Most people are not aware that you could do multicasting. You can on your local network, but the second a Class D IP address shows up your router, it's dropped on the floor and it will not go through. And so you have to do other stuff. And we'll get into that in a second. But so MPEG TS packets are wrappered in either UDP as multicast um, and or just good old TCP/IP, which is unicast, and that will pass through your router. The problem with TCP is it can do retries. Why unicast? Well, so the headers are smaller, they're processed very quickly, goes through switches, and it's meant to drive content through small networks. In the meantime, all right, that should say multicast. It shouldn't say unicast. It should say multicast. They're smaller, processed very quickly, and go through switches, but not through routers. So Haivision and Wowza are these two companies that were trying to come up with a better way to ship video through networks. Some people may be familiar with RTP and other technology, which has been around from all the different. There was Apple Talk, or not. Sorry, not Apple Talk. QuickTime. I was thinking Apple networking, but so basically, QuickTime came out, then Adobe Flash came out, and then Windows Media came out, and so all those formats were competitive to each other, but none of them solved some of the base problems of sending high quality video. And so the problem with high quality video is it was never architected to go through the internet in a manner of speaking. They've done other things like MPLS and other things. So, and in any case, fast forward, Haivision, Wowza, they came up with a wrapper protocol specifically to carry MPEG TS packets so that they would pass through the internet, and they called it SRT. SRT stands for Secure Reliable Transport. It is a licensed as a GPL, so it's open source project, license free. And this was done so that they can promote it very swiftly and get wide adoption through a bunch of different manufacturers around the industry. So it was designed specifically for carrying UDP video streams, and it includes a retry function and a scrambling capability. So when you send it through the public internet, it's this wrapper makes it so it passes through routers and it'll fix itself on the fly, and it's done in a way where any casual observer will just see a bunch of gobbledygook. So in other words, it's scrambled to the prying eyes of the dark internet web stuff. So it's secure. So yes, it can be encrypted, meaning we can't transmit SRT over the air. We have to leave our stuff in the clear. So there's a way to just turn off the encryption. You don't have to encrypt it, but it has the function built in. What we do want is its reliability capability. It has what's included in it is an ARQ, or an automatic retry mechanism. So, but why not use MPLS? Well, the main thing is MPLS, which stands for multi-protocol label switching, is it was a tool that was created to make what essentially is a tunnel between two router points. And all the routers in between obey MPLS handshake stuff, right? So it's like SRT, but um, that whenever you turn on MPLS, you have to have all the engineers that are touching all the switches between the point A and point B to agree on how to set the MPLS up and make certain they don't, boff the settings and things like that. So it takes a lot of resources to make that happen. And so it's not faint. It's not for the faint of heart. The other part is it does not support ARQ, where SRT linking over public internet is great for us. We're able to send SRT streams back and forth to each other so that we can definitely leverage it to use to interface repeaters. So repeaters on mountaintops with internet access with SRT encoders and decoders in them can send content full duplex through the internet of point A to point B. And it also has this other handshake stuff that happens inside the SRT protocol. And so one of them is a keep alive packet, which is sent every 10 milliseconds, so that if anything does go wrong with the SRT stream, it can automatically restore after a connection loss. It's very robust. It's very it was tuned for, the high performance market. The professional broadcasters use SRT a lot, but as it just so happens, there's so much support of SRT now. There's all these hardware solutions and software solutions that came out. So one of them is that there's these switchers that's made by Blackmagic called TEM, and those TEM switchers recently got a software upgrade. This was back in July last year, or maybe it was August, I forget exactly, that included SRT wrapper protocol. So that way you could take the output from the TEM and stream it to the internet to your buddy in another town or another country, doesn't matter. And he could decode it and watch your output direct from the TEM switcher. Other solutions came up like VLC, which is a free download. Wireshark is also another free download. I guess all these are free downloads, but the point is VLC is a decoder. Wireshark is an Ethernet sniffer. OBS Studio is a full-blown production package that you could run on your Windows box, and it's its own little switcher, and it supports SRT. We've even found a company that made a software image that when you blow it onto a little SD card and stick it in your Raspberry Pi, 2, 3, or 4, it'll turn that Raspberry Pi into an SRT decoder. So I can take the output of the ATEM, stream it to a Raspberry Pi that I can have sitting waiting up at the repeater site. And so I can switch straight into my repeater and then have that video go out through the repeater and you're on the air. So it's a very clever solution. And that's why we've been testing it and been using it, and we fully adopted and are starting to support it in a couple applications. So I wanted to get back to the 905 because it is very cool. Even though it's really expensive, everybody will agree it's really expensive. It'll help us increase amateur TV activity. And this is one of the hopes. We don't know how well, but because it's got a high price barrier point kind of thing. But it opens the doors to the SHF bands for any licensed ham. So technician on up. New bands not available on any previous radio. Of course, now that you can go to the store, you can buy this thing. put it on the air. Now you can get on 2 gig and 5 gig and 10 gig. And for a lot of people, that's kind of a wow, that's cool. Never been able to do that before. Before you had to make your own radios for, 5 and 10 gig and so forth. But then it's also the new modes that are built in, hitting the ground. So basically, plug in a camera, push a button, and all of a sudden you can start transmitting TV. So these points, when combined together, should usher, we hope, a flurry of activity for ATV. So how can we capture the 905 activity and make use of it? Because everything right now is point to point. It's all, you know, um, users doing QSOs, between themselves. There's no repeaters. So the main thing we have to look at is it's a frequency modulation television scheme. They did that because the FPGA inside the 905 is pretty well maxed out, because it's doing all that fancy stuff to make the all the microphone and video inputs and all that stuff go through that Ethernet. And so it's a pretty sophisticated design, but it does have its limits. But so FMTV, as you know, it can be wider than a typical NTSC signal. NTSC is 4.5 megahertz wide. Then you add the audio subcarrier and you're 6 megahertz wide. Um, but the cool thing about FMTV is it has much better noise immunity. And so that's because you're spreading the energy out. You can be 7 megahertz wide, you can be 15 megahertz wide, but so that fidelity, when you spread the energy out in a frequency modulated carrier, means it breaks up differently and the snow looks different. So that's why they used it on very early satellite links, so you get a really high quality picture. Also, it's video, early videotape was all done with FM video. And so they're just modulating FM onto the tape. Now, since then, they've come out with digital. And so they're recording bits to the tape, and that's a different system, but that's beside the point. FM is the way ICOM decided to go. So they implemented a direct FM solution for the video, since it obviously greatly simplified the radio's design. So the main thing about ICOM was their target market is the world. And so in that design, when it came time to implement video, whether you hook up an NTSC or a PAL camera to the side jack of the radio, it doesn't matter because it's FM. So they're FMing, doesn't matter whether it's NTSC or PAL or what the frame, doesn't matter. So they made by default a worldwide radio interface by just selecting FM. Had they gone analog, uh, uh, AM, it'd be different because now you have to comply with NTSC, PAL, CCAM, and all those other variants around the world, that kind of thing. So FM made it stupidly simple, and no matter what standard showed up, it didn't matter. So in our case, we want to have this discussion because we want to leverage that user base, because we want them to join in with us on our repeaters. So we need to make a repeater for the IC905. So because currently they're current limited to simplex QSOs, the ATV repeater will want to incorporate this FM TV reception on any one of the bands that are supported, 1.2, 2.3, 5.9 for the base model 905. So integrating the new frequencies into the system will require work with your frequency coordinators and their spectrum committees and stuff like that. So you can't just go out there and do this willy-nilly. But the good news is there's little modules, and we found some. And one of them is a drone thing that I can show you here. I have a we'll cut to this. So that's a drone FM video transmitter, very tiny, teeny tiny. So that could transmit to the 905. Okay. And that's the receiver. And it has these little buttons for tuning the channels. It supports a pretty wide frequency range. So obviously you have to tune it into the band for the one that we can use. But in any case, what you want is that FM demod, which is that bigger box I showed you, feeding into, in this case, I'm converting it to HDMI because I wanted to be able to have a really cheap switcher. And they make these little switch boxes that you can get off Amazon for, like dirt cheap, 20 bucks or whatever. So that way I can switch between the FM input and a slate, a slide that is essentially puts the repeater into beacon mode. So anybody that tunes the output will see this slide or a slate that has the repeater information, some of the details about it and its call sign and stuff like that. So this picture here represents like the bare minimum, but that it leverages HDMI. And I did that also because there's a clever thing you can do if you expand the model a little bit. And we'll talk more about that. So now we want to get into more advanced repeater designs because we want to be able to do more with just 905s. We want all of our other users. And that's where this comes into play. So here's a repeater that not only has an FM demodulator, that's the green box going into the composite video to HDMI, but I also have a QPSK IRD. It has HDMI. I have my SRT decoder running on a Raspberry Pi. That has HDMI. And then I also have my video source, which is the slate. That's HDMI. So that way, with a little bit of logic, I can have inputs for SRT streaming, FM demod from 905, or from anybody that's sending QPSK on the 1.2 gig band. And so I can switch between any one of those three. And when they all go quiet, then I can fall back to my little video source slideshow and send all that out through HDMI to an HDMI DA. So I got a 1:4 DA so that I can send a copy back out SRT to a new streaming location, a copy to the FM modulator, which goes back up to 5.9 so the 905 user can watch it. And I also include here what I call a DATV modulator, digital amateur television modulator, which could be QPSK, and modulate that so that I can put it on a cable frequency, which happens to align with ham radio, like channel 58, and that's 427 megahertz. And then also include a local monitor so I can see what's coming through the system when I'm at the repeater side. So this is a very clever concept, and I can build this thing with products that are all available on Amazon, except for Starlink. But you see what I'm doing here is I'm building it in the most simplest form possible with just little boxes, little things that you can buy. The SRT decoder is a Raspberry Pi. That's like 35 bucks. That FM demod for drone, it comes with a transmitter and receiver. I think that was $49. The composite video to HDMI is a Blackmagic box. That's like 59 bucks. The QPSK RD is like 39.95. You see what I'm doing here, including that HDMI switch. The one thing I don't have available from Amazon is the built-in controller with all of its logic, but that's kind of up to the home brewer. You can use your imagination. Another Raspberry Pi obviously would make sense, but one that has a shield on it that has relays and opto isolators, so you can pick off signals from the various devices and send outputs through relay drops to turn transmitters on and off and stuff like that. Then you can get even more complicated. This one is the one where instead of a switch that's 4-to-1 and then an HDMI DA, what if I changed that switch in the middle to be a 4x4, meaning any input can go to any output. So that way you can actually have SRT decoder going to FM modulator, and have the FMD mod input from a 905 going out SRT encoder, so forth and so on. So in other words, you get the idea. I can do a really cool full duplex kind of thing in just by changing that one little switch. But wait, there's more. What if I had a StatMux encoder system that's StatMuxing the whole thing, and I can encode all those channels at the same time, turn them into a multiplex, and send any one of those packets to any one of the outputs, or send the entire shooting match out DVB-S2 modulation to 1.2 gig so you can see all the channels all the time. In other words, the sky's the limit here. Once you move into the IP domain, you can route certain packets to go to certain destinations. So in other words, I can select which decoder gets which packet on the way out to an FM modulator, or I can say which packets go back to the internet, or which ones go to an IP link that goes out a ham band type link system, stuff like that. So it's now taking on a new life of its own kind of thing, where this system can be like on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as long as you've got inputs coming from different locations and destinations for sending the content to somebody. This is the thing that I actually have running down in my garage right now. So this is the kind of stuff we've been working on over here in Tucson. Well, it can get even more complicated. What if you put a switch in front of those encoders? Then you can do even more routing from a bank of decoders, a bank of video sources. So I can do way more video selection just to go out either the same as before or maybe even slightly different. I've simplified the output. But sky's kind of the limit here. It depends on your system requirements. It depends on what you're trying to do, where you're sending the content to, and where it's coming from. It just depends on how many lanes of traffic you're trying to offer and or curate, I guess you could say. At the end of the day, there's something missing here, and we didn't talk about it. And it's because while we have the internet's not perfect. What we're missing in the Americas is a wideband transponder on a geostationary satellite hanging somewhere over the Americas. AMSAT Annual Space Symposium held their annual meeting. It was back in Tampa on October 28th. And in the audience, there were more people in the audience that were presenters than there were people just showing up for the show. That to me is pretty lopsided. It's unfortunate that more people don't go to this event. I didn't get to go because I was too busy at the time, but a friend of mine did, and he took notes for me. And so, what I want to point out here is if you go to the AMSAT website, stated in their strategic plans is this ideal goal to get a HEO satellite. It's a highly elliptical orbit satellite. It's a type of spacecraft which is designed and set up to be capable of providing essentially a wide area and meant to be continuous coverage from a series of high Earth and geostationary transfer orbits. So you'd have in elliptical orbit, you would have two, if not three satellites that would come whipping around, and one would always be hanging way out over, the place that you're trying to send lots of traffic with. When it comes around the backside, it whips around too fast that it's not worth locking onto. So with two or more of those satellites always present up above, you would have the ability to carry lots and lots of data. They also mentioned what's called a greater orbit, larger footprint satellite or a golf satellite. It's a type of spacecraft that has a wide range of support of complex capabilities, but it's too also meant to be a very high orbit or elliptical orbit, or even possibly a geostationary. but geostationary is dominated by the commercial spacecraft industry. Um, Geo orbital slots are super expensive. I can't even tell you. They're, obviously they're taken up by people that have commercial interest, and their business is predicated on people that buy or lease spectrum from them for running through their transponders. And they have lots of insurance, and the spacecraft is typically covered by Lloyd's of London and all that kind of stuff. And every once in a while they go awry, and then they boost it out of position and put another one in its place, usually right after it. Stuff like that. They're in it for making money. But I wanted to point out that the AMSAT folks during their symposium didn't talk about any of this golf or HEO, none of that. No mention of geostationary. I don't know where that group is going. But if they had talked about a linear satellite, us television folks want them to consider something that looks like this. A satellite with a linear transponder um, is just a transponder, is type of a repeater. It's a way to make a uplink go through a passband and then get output on a downlink with more power. So that's pretty much the definition of a repeater. But it operates across a range of frequencies instead of a fixed frequency. Transponders can also be designed to invert the passband. So what comes in upper sideband goes down lower sideband, stuff like that. So you can define all that stuff. Um, and so there's a very, very strong case for doing what's called a software defined transponder, an SDT, not a sexually transmitted disease, but no, it's a SDT is a software defined transponder, so that during the course of the life of a satellite, if something should go sideways, fall off, not perform as well, you could then potentially reprogram that transponder. It is the best possible solution, but it's also probably the most problematic or um, complicated, most expensive. But in the interim, we'll take anything we can get. And so the guys in Europe, they do enjoy an amateur payload that's running on a commercial satellite that is in a geostationary orbit, and I'm jealous. I wish we had one too. But you could also make a land-based, a terrestrial-based linear transponder repeater. You can do this in your garage too. You just don't need to have all the infrastructure for running a satellite because it's just bolted to the ground. So you too can build one of these. Why would you? Well, it's because we like the adaptability. So today it can be this, and tomorrow it could be something different. And so purpose-built repeaters, like the one I was showing you before, are pretty easy to architect. But if you then decide you want to support more or different things, well, then you got to, make change, file with the Spectrum Committee or with the Repeater Coordinating Council and make more changes. Well, with a software defined one, it makes it very convenient to modify as you go. So it's a very cool concept. And so we'll summarize. We're almost out of time. We'll have a little time for questions. Okay, so main things. We are secondary on all of the bands above 1 gig, with one exception, and that's the 2.3 gig band. So we lose the battle to those who are granted primary. Um, this is the point for use it or lose it. And TV is a very strong argument for using up all that bandwidth that we have that's way up on those bands. We're already losing spectrum in the UHF band, and it's because of other hams. It's not because of commercial interest, so forth and so on. TV is a wideband, high bitrate sport. We ain't messing around. We need megahertz of bandwidth to do the stuff that we. There's nothing saying you can't do narrow, but the difference with a narrow band TV transmission is you either sacrifice the resolution or you sacrifice the frame rate or both. And then it's a question of, is that really fast scan? Well, you could say it's fast scan if it's at least changing, I don't know, 15 times a second and you can still see it if it's a thumbnail. Okay, fine. But then there's guys, they want to run HD, and that's a pig in bandwidth, so to speak. But the main thing is you can make anything work. It just depends on if you have the bandwidth to make it fit. That's the main thing. Amateur Television Network is here to help. We have chapters all over the place. Most of them are in California, but we have them also in Colorado, Ohio, of course, here in Arizona. Um, the people that we have a wide range and diverse knowledge base of all the stuff that's been used and talked about here and also online and on the web and also on our nets. We have several weekly nets, speaking of which. Anybody can join either on RF if you're local to one of the repeaters or on the internet. And this is my little, I'm going to pimp this here, where we get on Whereby. In fact, it starts right about now on whereby.com/ATN TV. And so anybody can join. Our nets are not complicated. It's very simple. It's just like Zoom, like this, because we're all over the place. But we're very TV focused minded people, I guess you could say. And we all have a bunch of range of different skill sets and stuff like that. And so I just want to wrap up with thank you. Mars needs women. No, ATN needs women. No, I mean, we need more TV operators. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate talking to you guys. We will be doing this talk and some other talks later this year. It looks like I may be going to Dayton, which I'm going to show off my little mock-up system that was on slide 27 kind of thing that showed how you can take inputs from 905s and QPSK and switch between the two. I built it in my spare copious time kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun, but we made it just to prove it. And it's a working solution that I can take to my various events that I go to. And so we'd be happy to show that to people in person. Like if you go to YumaFest, my flight case is going to be at YumaFest. It's a 4-channel multiplexing system, and it's Qualm on channel 58. Gary is going to run that system. And then at Dayton, I'll have the little small flyaway system that I'm going to pack in my luggage and stuff like that. So there's we're showing a bunch of different system capabilities at different locations. So stay tuned, more to come. And with that, we'll turn it back to Dan, K7REX in Idaho, and we'll stand by for questions. Take it away, Dan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Barry, let's jump to you. What we got in chat?
Sure, we have one chat. Dave, you want to come on and ask your question? It's probably easier to say it directly.
Yeah, it turns out that where I'm located here in Southeast Michigan, we're above line A. And that means that we do not have access to anything between 420 and 430 megahertz.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah. And so I was just kind of wondering if you have a solution for that. Many years ago, we had an analog ATV repeater here, and it was up in the top end of the 430 band, like at 449, whatever,
Yeah.
And so in order to get that to work, I had one of those down converters for
Yeah.
ATV at the time, and I had to modify it to do high side injection so that so I could get it to come out on the channel 3 here.
You got to do what you got to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I was just curious as if there's any plan for all of us people that are too close to the Canadian border to opt to use the lower 10 megahertz of 70 centimeters.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid that's kind of a lost cause because all the solutions are kind of more complicated than they need to be, but it is what it is. You're kind of stuck. But quite frankly, I think the move along the Canadian border would be to hook up on 1.2 gig. And I point that out because A, there's more spectrum up there. B, there's QPSK capability built into all those cheap little tuners that you can buy on Amazon. So if you go searching for DVB-S, S2, whatever, do a search on Amazon, and what you'll see is there's one of a number of manufacturers that make tiny little set-top boxes that you hook up to your TV using HDMI, and they're like $39.95. Well, the connector on the back is an F connector port, which is looking for what's called L band, and that means it's typically the coax cable connection that goes up to an LNB, which is pointed at a dish, and the dish is pointed at a satellite, and what you're seeing from the satellite is DVB-S, S2, whatever. Well, what we've been doing and what we've been very successful doing is running DVB-S terrestrial up at Mount Diablo, and they transmit a multiplex of content on a DVB-S carrier that's 4 megahertz wide, but it's carrying 4 channels inside 4 megahertz on the 1.2 gig band, and I think it's a 1253. They had to move up off the bottom where it starts at like 1240 and goes up kind of thing. They had to move off the bottom because of GLONASS users. And GLONASS is the next thing that's coming to encroach because it's the accuracy that you get when you buy one of these differential GPS systems. They use the combination of the American GPS and the Russian GLONASS to get the super high accuracy, when you're doing surveying or you're doing the crops in your field kind of thing. In fact, that was one of the problems. We created interference on Mount Diablo, and the tractor started turning funny in the field. So the guy didn't have straight lines in his rows. And I'm serious, this happened kind of thing. I was like, oh my God. So anyway, this is the kind of stuff we're running into. But so all he did was he moved up and problem went away. So yeah, 1.2, 2.3, 5 gig. That's kind of the mantra now we're going. Because as well at Mount Diablo, pave pause. It's darkened the UHF band. You can't put a repeater anywhere near a pave pause, which is up by Beale Air Force Base near Sacramento. And so all of a sudden we lost a bunch of 440 machines just overnight.
Well, we run into problems here, say for 5 gigahertz, because Ann Arbor is tree town.
Well, yes, of course. Yeah.
And so 5 gigahertz gets blocked by all the foliage.
Of course. Yeah.
But 1.2 gigs might be something that we could look into. There isn't the 1.2 gig band here has not got a lot of usage in it.
There
But
you
I can
go.
tell you 70 centimeters and 2 meters is completely jammed full of repeaters.
Yeah.
There's just like no open channels anyplace.
Yeah. So Dave, hey, let's stay in touch. There's some cool 1.2 gig antennas. There's patch antennas that we've been playing with. Plus, what's the name of that company? There's M Squared, but their 1.2 gig antennas are optimized for 1296, and they don't do very well when you go down the band. But Directive Systems that makes the little loop antennas for 1.2 and 2 gig.
Yeah.
Those do operate down low, and they work really well on ATV. So as well as weak signal. I mean, that's what their primary sales market is, but they work on TV too.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, look at this. We have Tom, who I haven't seen in a long time. We missed you, Tom. W3TDH. Go ahead. You got your hand up.
Yes, sir. Can I be heard okay?
Yes.
Good. This leaves some questions. Is there going to be a new ATV book? Is anybody working on that?
Are you asking me to write a book now?
Well, I'm asking, can't somebody write a book? I'm not trying to
Hey, Tom, are you an editor?
waylay you.
Are you an editor?
No.
I'm not a publisher, but I can write.
Okay, so you could get together.
I mean, we could talk to the ARRL.
Right.
I'm certain they would love one, but I need
Yes, a high challenge thing, but you could put a lot more in that than you could put in a 1 hour talk.
Oh, I know, I know. Tell me, you're speaking to the choir.
Okay, so some other things you used
Sure.
QPSK, and
Yeah.
I don't know what it means.
Quadrature
And
phase shift keying.
okay,
Okay. What does that
um,
mean? That means the symbols, when you transmit a waveform, you're modulating, right? You have to shift the modulation either by amplitude, by frequency, or by phase. Okay. So you got those three aspects, right? So in a QPSK symbol, they're phase shifting at a very high rate, very quickly. And they're shifting it between uh, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, and 1, 1 very fast. So they're shipping 2 bits per waveform shift, which is a symbol. So every time I shift the waveform, it's another symbol. It's another symbol. And they're doing this at mega symbols per second. So it's going really fast. Now you understand QPSK.
right. The other thing, something we had been doing not very recently is because the cable television input of American receivers are required to have an NTSC uh, receiver in them,
Yeah.
lest the cable companies have to do some work on their system. No, they put it off on the public. Stop rant now. But that allowed us to send NTSC signals right back to the EOC,
Yes.
and they put their outdoor antenna on their cable input, and yeah,
This was the trick we've known for many years. Yes.
right. But with this, we'll need some sort of down converter
Ah,
to to feed the television its stuff, right?
remember that qualm thing I told you about? It
Right.
was on slide 29. And so what I did was I bought a little box they sell on Amazon. You know, when you go to these, how shall I mention it? Sleazy hotels. Maybe you don't go to them. Okay, fine. But so the hotels will take HDMI, put it in this box, and it outputs on QAM frequency, it's cable TV. You're making cable TV with this box. That box probably cost a couple $100. Okay. What it is that HDMI signal is coming from your hacked receiver. And so basically they're giving you whatever channels they can hack and put those channels into a cable that goes to all the different rooms and so forth. So this is how you make a mom and pop hotel motel cable TV distribution system. And the boxes, like I said, they sell them all over Amazon. They're a couple $100. And so,
Okay, and a last thing, just I guess it grates on my nerves because I was in fire and rescue for 45 years,
sure,
and we had to understand insurance better than most people. Lloyd's of London insures absolutely nothing under any circumstances. So when you say they cover something, just like Bob Durante always said they insured his nose, you're mistaken. All Lloyd's does is coordinates underwriters on
coordinate.
behalf of the insurance industry.
That's right.
And it came from Lloyd's Tea House, where they'd write the name of the ship up on the wall, and the various gentlemen of means would walk up and write their name under that,
Yeah.
and
And
how
then
much of the risk they were willing
the
to take.
underwriter, yes, yes.
Right. So just
Yeah, they're,
just
they're
for
the
everybody's,
clearinghouse. I get that. Yeah, no, I
yeah.
understand.
And they've changed names slightly. They got a very old history. They're very proud of it, uh, and they don't do insurance.
No, yeah, but Allstate does. Not in
No,
California.
no, no. Allstate has the lowest rate of payout on premiums in the world of any insurer. So that'll tell you all you need to know.
That's exact- Yeah, I'm through USAA, so never mind. Any
Okay,
other questions?
yes.
Thank you.
The words right out of my mouth there, so.
We're good
Hey,
in chat,
here's
Ken.
downtown Tucson.
Go ahead, Barry.
We're good in chat.
Okay. So you jump on there. I thought you had something. Don't see anything, hands up. I don't see anything else going on. It's been a great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate it. And I'm sorry. I don't know what you were going to do otherwise, but I'm sorry that that got set aside. And I'm very pleased you came out.
Hand up.
Barry, I'm going to mute you, Barry. You have to unmute yourself. You keep chopping people off.
Dennis has his hand up.
All right, Dennis.
Well, of course, I gotta thank Joel for coming and joining us. Like I said, we've known Joel a long time, and it's always
Dennis,
good
you're
to
welcome.
see you, and always great to hear your
Absolutely.
presentations.
Well, as I mentioned, from here, I'm going to go to Whereby
Yeah.
because that's the Mount Diablo group. So they're Thursday nights on Whereby. Uh, Sunday night is the Arizona group where we meet at 7 Mountain Time. I know that's a little complicated for some people, but but so then Tuesday is all the Los Angeles group, which is actually the biggest group. There's about 20 check-ins on that one, but that we always are talking about the SRT stuff and or the little modules for 905 receivers and all that stuff. We talk about it all the time. And so Dennis, it'd be a hoot that you never know what you might find, but it just so happens we have a bunch of poop on our websites that they constantly need updating. But if you go to ATN,
Yeah. Oh,
search on
yeah.
it, you'll see that there's probably a repeater near you kind of thing.
Actually, there isn't, unfortunately. We're in the middle of everywhere. There isn't anything. But I've been talking to the ATN guys down in LA and Orange County, trying to figure out a way to get on ATN.
There is one on Snow Peak,
Yeah, but you know where we are, right?
Kern County. Yeah,
No, what's that?
you're in Kern County.
Yeah, but we're in Indian Wells Valley. We're on the east side of Kern County, between the Central Valley and Death Valley. So we got mountains on all sides.
You'd be a long shot to Potosi.
That's what I've thought. Yeah, Potosi might be the way I can get out of here, but
We're going to be
that's a
working.
long haul.
We're going to be working on Potosi in April when we're going to meet up for our annual Let's Go Goof Around at NAB and
Yeah.
go to the ham reception at NAB, and
Mhm.
then we'll be up on Potosi right after that. We're going to be
Oh,
doing
that's
some
cool.
work up there. Yeah.
I just did a talk last night to the guys at the Henderson Amateur Radio Club on getting started in amateur microwave.
Excellent.
And I said, you guys, they've got a repeater up on Potosi, but they got to get up there for microwaves.
Just like Robin Critchell.
Yep.
I've
Exactly.
worked them up there many times.
I'm sure you have. Yeah.
DM25 Gulf Whiskey, I think it is.
I don't recall what it is, but yeah, and Potosi's probably a best, but it is a long haul from here. I could probably do sideband on 10 gigahertz easier than any other thing.
Yeah, no, I get you. And in which case, there is a guy down in Yucca Valley who's a member. And so it kind of stands to reason he gets in somewhere, and I quite frankly can't remember which hilltop he gets in from, but he does check in.
Interesting. Yucca Valley. Yeah, it wouldn't be Santiago.
No, it's north of Santiago.
Gotta be north of Santiago. I was thinking somewhere up in the San Bernardino Mountains. I think there's
Big Bear.
yeah, Big Bear. Yeah, I know.
Well, that's where Gary's at.
Yeah,
Gary's in
Crestline.
Yeah, he's in Crestline. Yes.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about are these things that we have out here on the West Coast. They're called mountains.
Mountains.
Yeah, I feel for you guys back in Maryland and Idaho, where Idaho's not too bad. You got some good mountains over in Idaho, but
yeah, lots.
you got mountains. Yeah. But some of the other guys, where I feel your pain where you have foliage. And what that means is, yeah, we really, really need a satellite. And like if anybody knows a way to get a hold of Elon Musk, we can certainly use some of his guidance and help to get a payload into orbit because we really do need something for those people that are, terrain challenged and foliage challenged kind of thing. It's the only way it's going to work kind of thing. Other than internet, but that's kind of like cheating, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, looking around for any more. Barry just left us. I can't rely upon him to see people putting their hands up. Anybody else got any questions, comments? It's been a real good one. Joe, be sure to send your slides to me if you would.
I can.
Okay, appreciate that.
Hey, Dan, did I get your most recent email? And if you could do me a favor, just poke me an email and then that will pop to the top.
All right.
I got a jillion emails, so.
Okay.
And I want to also make a shameless plug here. I am the chairperson for Microwave Update 2025. It will be in Tucson, Arizona, and we're going into contract with Casino del Sol right off of Valencia down here in Tucson. It is a super nice venue, great people. My wife and I, we just had bento box sushi for lunch today over there as we were working on the paperwork to go into contract with them. But it's a really nice facility. It has RV capability as well as two different hotel sites to choose from. And of course, it's a casino, so the Indian tribes will love the fact that you come with all that money. But it's Tucson, Arizona. We have a lot of cool stuff to go see here in Tucson. So bring your spouse, bring your wife, bring your checkbook.
I'm gonna say, bring your money.
Yeah, well, it's a good destination, but it's the premier microwave update is the premier event it's every once a year and we attract worldwide. So we're actually going to open the door for papers here in about a week, so people can submit papers for. We publish a compendium every year. It's a big, thick book of all the papers and research stuff that people have been working on in their garages and stuff like that. So,
Okay. Okay.
so
Well,
come to Tucson. It's in October, and that's, by the way, if you've never been to Tucson in October, it's some of the best weather we have is October, by the way. It's gets hot during the day, but the evenings and afternoons are just best. It's after the monsoon season, so
been there, done that, have you?
you'll miss all the thunderstorms from the monsoon season, but that's okay.
All right. With that, I'm going to close this out, say 73, and appreciate everybody for showing up tonight. It's been a pretty good crowd, nice conversation. Joe, you did a great job. Appreciate you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Great news on microwave update as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for
You got it.
that. Awesome.
Bring your 905.
Oh.